been living in West Africa for 22 years, but I come back to Ontario every year. My family is privileged to have a cottage in Algonquin Park on Cache Lake, which is where I met Wilson. And normally I paddle with my brother Pat, who is, by the way, an Olympic champion in rowing from the 1984 Games. And we like to compete together, and so we decided to get into marathon paddling. This past year, he was unable to make it. He's an emergency doctor in British Columbia. And the natural choice for a new partner was Wilson. And Wilson, and in fact, there are three of us in the regatta, MRX, that are from Cache Lake. Tom Phillips, who was in the Strokes of Genius behind us, he's also got a cottage right across the lake from us, so we've known each other, and they were very pesky this year. They've improved tremendously, and he and his partner, they would not give up, and right to the very end. And you could see how competitive the race was. Yesterday across Lake of Bays, we knew we had a pretty good lead on them, but in the dark, they had turned the lights off. They didn't want us to know where they were. And
I kept saying, no, there's no one behind us.
No one behind us. I said, Wilson, so we're kind of...
Meanwhile, they're like...
We're cruising, right? And saying, okay, with no pressure. And then all of a sudden we come into the bay for Portage Bay. And then they flick the lights on, and the guys say at the Portage, they're right behind you. I go like, what?
Yeah.
How's that possible? So they had been working very hard all the way through the race to catch up, and they were remarkably fast. And I mean, it was a great day yesterday. We were very lucky with the weather. I mean, it was basically perfect, right? The start of the race, it was overcast, but it wasn't foggy. It was warm enough that it wasn't foggy, which could have been a real problem if we'd been on the lakes having to navigate in the fog. It was warm enough also that we were never hypothermic. I ended up falling into the water on the first portage, where with Strokes of Genius they knocked us the boat a little bit, and I went into the thing. And I thought, actually, this is pretty good, right?
And he looked at me like,
he was like, did you do that to me? No, thank you very much.
I think it was cold.
And as it turned out, pretty much every portage thereafter, as soon as we put the boat in the water, I'd just go for a quick dunk and get into the boat because it was cooling me off. It was a warm day, and that allowed us to maintain the temperature over the day. I would say, our strategy was do our race, right? We knew that the Strokes of Genius would be the team to beat. So we ended up a little ahead of them at the very beginning. I think Tom was a little slow on the run, and we made them work to catch up. And we knew that our strength was going to be on the portages, where we would go quite a bit faster than them. So we would make them work to catch up to us, tire themselves out, get to the next portage, zip ahead, make them work to, and that's exactly how the race played out. Right? They'd catch up on the water, and they were really putting a lot of energy on. My guess is that they spent more energy than we did overall, but they played a very smart game. And for my lesson on this race, it's about health management, that you have to manage your body for over 15 hours. And so we had, our food package was essentially these, Boost and Sure type drinks. 250, 350 calories. We had 9 of them every hour and a half. So every hour and a half, we'd stop, eat, drink the stuff. And then, you could feel the energy. About 10 minutes later, energy's going up. And then it would drain after an hour and a half, and then boost it up and then down. And, the key is that, in the second half of the race, it's very easy to bomb, as they say, where you get beyond the point where you can recover. You've dehydrated, you don't have enough food in your body, and then you basically fall apart. Finished this year, I finished in better condition than I've ever finished in this race or any other race.
Same. Just speaking of that, like last year, just under the health management, I wasn't up to what we did this year, and definitely was crashing, knocking a few times. I thought I was done last year. I just was so exhausted. And this one, it felt great and strong pattern across the whole thing, and especially with the last portage with that run. And then some guys go way too hard off the beginning and kill themselves, and you see it right off the bat. And we were half in the pack, right?
Yeah.
And me and Tim were just doing our thing, right? And just watching some of these guys go.
No, you guys pace yourself really well for it. Yeah. You're exactly right. A lot of people start off and they're excited, right? So the adrenaline, they've got to feed that adrenaline and try to be off the start line very quickly. Yeah. So one of the concerns that we had for this year's Algonquin Outfitters Muskoka River X was the temperature that we were going to see. This was going to be probably one of the most warm races, one of the warmest times that we had. And you battled the opposite end of it, the cold. And that, tell me the difference between the warm day that we had yesterday and the coldest one that you guys had.
Actually, it was our first MRX. It was brutally cold and it was wet. So we were, the big issue was, what do you wear? Because you know that once you're paddling, your body is heating up. But as you're sitting around in the starting blocks and in all that prep work, you've got fleeces on, you can't paddle in all that stuff. This year was so much easier because we were just in shorts, t-shirt. Right from the beginning, we knew we wouldn't have to change. I would much prefer a warm, calm day. Another big factor was not just the heat, but it was the wind. There was virtually no wind. In fact, if there was any wind, it would always seem to be behind us, a light little wind. We were nervous about what happens on Lake of Bays in the afternoon. If the prevailing wind, you get this headwind coming down the lake with those waves, and it was very hairy. Imagining going into that, I was nervous about that, and it's one of the reasons why we did not do a pro boat. I thought that the pro boats might not make it, because if it was like that. In the end, it was absolutely perfect. It was like glass all night. Through the rivers, through the lakes, everything was really ideal. So, and as I said, what we ended up doing is I just plunged into the water every time there was a portage. It was a perfect, cooling. There were a couple of markers that, if we had known in advance, there's a big green flashing light which marks the entrance to Portage Bay. And we could see that from the end of the, right from the bottom of the lake. If we'd known that, we would have headed straight to that. Instead, we were kind of deeking and ducking around the shoreline, knowing that we had to stay on I guess it's the west shore. But we ended up going a lot further than we really needed to go. And because it was so calm, you could take a beeline across there. But the Lake of Bays is tricky, and also because you got all the lights of the cottages, right?
And it's 13 hours.
Yeah, at that point you're kind of
you're punchy.
Yeah, punchy, definitely punchy at that point. That was the trickiest part for us, I think, was the section from Fraserburg up to Baysville, where they had some hazards, and we had done the course the weekend before, and we had our game plan how to deal with the hazards. We were going to kind of what we call lining the boat. We were running along the sort of the shore in the rocky spots, shallows, pulling the boat with some ropes. Yesterday we get on the course and we're in the section, said, Jesus, what happened? There were new islands. Somebody had dropped the water by 2 feet. And we thought, my God, does this mean we need a different game plan? Because they said that there was a portage. In the end, we decided to stay in the river, and it turned out to be okay. A tricky spot. And in fact, there's a kind of fun little story. I think we were chasing Sean Urban of the K1 for a lot of the kayak, Sean Urban, for a good part of the afternoon. And we could see him up maybe 200 meters in front of us and coming up to one of the portages. And all of a sudden, he starts to sprint. He's going to try and make his way up the Swift. And this is one that we had a strategy to pull off to the side and run along this. Okay, good luck. He almost made it, and then he turned sideways and flipped right in front of us. And you're like, you know, my first thought was, oh my God, okay, we're going to have to stop and help pick this guy up, which would have cost us some time. But you know, it was shallow enough that he was able to get out of the boat, flip it over, empty it, and then by that time we had caught up to him completely, and that's where last time we saw him, we passed him at that point. So you know, I can imagine the people that were doing those sections at night must have been very hairy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got full visibility, you can see the ground and the stones and that. You know where you're going.
Read the current.
And you read the current. If you're doing that in the middle of the night, it would have been really, really tough.
So you said before that the success for you this time around was kind of body management and making sure you had your calories and that. So other than that, generally, what would you say if somebody came to you and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this, what's the one thing that we should do to make sure that we can finish?
Yeah.
What would you say to that is?
I would say practice. Paddle.
So practice paddling.
Practice. Like
And
it's all about being in the boat.
Yeah, so just experiencing
it, just getting here.
Yeah. And you guys though paddle some of the route ahead of time too,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. So there is a big advantage to knowing the course, and all of the top teams will have done the course at some point fairly close to it, so that they know exactly where they're taking the boat out, where they're putting it in. There are on several of the portages there are multiple routes, and we've learned over time that you can make or break the race on depending on which route you pick. Wilson Falls is a perfect example, right? There's a kind of a shortcut that involves traversing through the bush. It's reasonably well marked if you know where you're going. If you follow the classic route, you're losing several hundred meters right there. So practicing the course makes a big difference. Being able to have a strategy for dealing with things like the swifts, because a lot depends on the water at the time.
I think a lot of it is age versus experience and wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think you get these young paddlers that maybe are very fit and have a lot of energy and everything and that, but really just don't have the skill, the developed skills that you guys have.
Something as simple as going upstream. How do you manage to stay out of the current? Make and save tons of time by just where's the current fast, stay in the slow water, get into eddies, actually move you forward in that. Obviously he's older, and so lifting the boat out of the water, he's not going to be as fast on the portages, but in the boat, he's as fast as everybody.
So if you guys could sum up or maybe describe the Algonquin Outfitters Muskoka River X was...
To be honest with you, in a way, the Muskoka River X for me is like a homecoming.
Good job, guys.
Well done. Yeah, honestly, it's good. Congratulations. Cheers.